Hi, Scott.
Sorry. And right at noon, the chimes in the can you guys hear them? They feel really loud on my end. There's a church like right across the alley from our office that on the hour starts chiming. So if you can't hear them, then okay, good. They feel very loud to me. I feel like I'm having to talk over them. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Am I allowed to share my screen? Let me see. Now I can't see you guys, but is that shared?
Yeah, yes, I can see it.
Okay, cool. Lo and behold, I can learn new tricks. Should I just go ahead and start? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So starting with the House bills, the new bills that have come out since we spoke last, start with House Bill 1178. Actually, no, I apologize. I think 1173 was the first new one. Does that look familiar to anybody? Or did we talk about it? I don't think this came out technically the day before we met, but I don't think we talked about it. So there are three categories of today's bills. We've got several that I feel like are, by my read, just kind of an FYI. I want you to know about them, but they're probably not things you need to really weigh in on or be active with. There are a handful that I could really use some expertise and maybe a review with, by some eyeballs that have more knowledge than I do to tell me if they're good or bad. And then there are a few that I think are going to be sort of taking up the most oxygen that we probably will want to spend more time talking about. I would put this probably in the FYI category. So it takes the existing school safety resource advisory board and it broadens the scope of their work to include recommendations for the entire Office of School Safety, as opposed to just the School Safety Resource Center. So, it's not a requirement on districts at this point. It just would be broadening the scope of what this advisory board can review and talk about and make recommendations for. So as bills go, I don't know that it's a particularly earth-shattering, world-changing kind of bill, but just thought you might want to be aware of it.
Is there a fiscal note that goes with it?
I don't believe so, but let me just check. These are also pretty new. Oh, there is a fiscal note. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a zero fiscal note, which would make sense. They're not expanding the size of that group at all. You're just expanding what they talk about. So I think whatever they're spending on it now would just remain the same. Sorry, I need to move that. Okay. The next one probably will require a little more discussion, although I will say there are two competing bills on this topic. And if I had to bet, this is the less likely to make it through. So this picks up where Rep. English left off last year. She has tried for at least 2 years now, maybe 3, to ban student seclusion. She spent a lot of time trying to get a compromise. I know some of the parties involved last year in the negotiations were the Disability Law Colorado, and for some reason the Douglas County lobbyist got kind of in the middle of it, and I can't remember now if that was because Douglas County was particularly egregious with seclusion of kids or what. But anyway, I know they spent a lot of time on it last year, and I don't think any of those were incorporated, those like language suggestions. It seems to me that this is just a straight up, you can't have seclusion of students.
Did they ever take any testimony on this bill or anything?
Oh gosh, let me think.
I mean, so I guess what I'm trying to understand here is like, what what kind of claims has she made about harm, or unintended consequences, right? What do I need to be thinking about here?
Yeah, so she did, I feel like I do remember her talking about this topic in committee. Let me just see if I can pull up I'm not remembering the bill number from last year. Let's see, would have been a House bill. Would have been 2024. I believe it did die in the first committee, but probably they would have taken, I mean, there's a gavel amendment that says if you introduce a bill, it has to have at least one hearing. So I'm sure they did at least have a hearing on the topic last year on that bill. I don't know why this isn't, maybe my little thing is in the way here. So I don't know why the General Assembly is not pulling up a bill, any of her bills from last year. So I can try to look up the hearing on that bill last year and just, there's an audio archive that I could listen to and just kind of look into what claims were made last year. I know, here in Denver, there was an issue with, I believe it was a middle school that was using a seclusion room on a kid. That was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Rep English is actually from El Paso County, and I don't know if there's a district down there that has had some issues. So let me just make a note to myself about that topic, and I can pull up the audio of her presenting that bill last year and see what she says about it, because I just don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
So at this point, obviously this is a difficult one to straight up oppose, even though I know a lot of districts probably have some concerns about a wholesale ban. So there's a lot of monitoring. Like I said, there's another somewhat competing bill. It's not exactly a competing bill because it doesn't do the same thing, but I think it's on the same topic, and I think it would give legislators a little bit of an ability to say we're going to do this and not that. So we can get to the other one in a minute, and then maybe, if you want to weigh in on either or both, we can kind of weigh the options at that point. So unless you want to do any more discussion on 1178, I will move on, and then we can kind of revisit the topic when we get to the next bill. So 1188 this was one that I would put into the category of I would really love someone with a little more expertise, particularly legal / HR, to review it for me and tell me if this is good or bad or helpful or not. I'm also not familiar enough with current law on some of these issues to know how dramatically this is changing things, but it does make some changes to the mandatory reporting laws and what is required. So if there is, I don't know if it's Autumn or someone else that could maybe take a look at it for me and just let me know if this is something.
Yeah, I can go ahead and, or unless Connor, you want to go ahead and do it, but I can just grab this and send it on to Lauren and to Autumn and see what they have to say. Does that sound good? I think you're muted, Connor.
Talking to myself here. Yeah, that sounds fine. I
Okay.
can just shoot it. I can shoot it a text right now, actually.
Okay. I can, yeah, and I'll send an email with the link to it so they've got it.
Yeah, it looks like there are no other school districts that have weighed in on this one or the other yet. So it'll be in committee week after next. So we could still, if we're able to get any kind of feedback by the time we talk next Friday, we'd still have time to take a position before committee if we wanted to. Okay, so in the category of, this one is probably going to take up some oxygen. House Bill 1192, which creates a graduation requirement, which everybody loves, has kind of two components. There is a financial literacy course requirement, graduation requirement, and then also completion of FAFSA. And, you know, the proponents assured me that they have no intention of changing the standards. We have financial literacy embedded in our standards currently. So if you kind of extrapolate that, like, you're not changing standards, we have standards, you have to teach to the standards. I feel like it's kind of already a graduation requirement in a roundabout sort of not explicit kind of way. The one thing that I have heard from some other districts is the concern about having an actual specific course requirement as opposed to having them embedded in some other civics classes where, you know, you've sort of got your current staff and the distribution of classes and that kind of thing, that if you had to have designated financial literacy courses that students take, you would have to sort of, you know, potentially hire more staff, but at a minimum, shuffle some staff, get people retrained so you have designated financial literacy teachers that are teaching this particular financial literacy class, which is a whole lot of work and potentially a whole lot of expense. The Greeley superintendent said she was going to have to hire 10 new teachers to satisfy this requirement. So, you know, I don't know if it would hit you all that dramatically or if you even currently already have financial literacy designated classes, but it seems like there might be some space for an amendment to say, you know, could you meet this requirement by, you know, demonstrating that you have incorporated all of the current financial literacy standards in the curriculum that you are requiring in your current graduation requirements or something like that.
And
yeah,
I see a big red flag actually on this one. The bill requires submission of free application for federal student aid or Colorado application for state financial aid as a condition of high school graduation.
yeah,
That to me is a big red flag for those people who are not right now applying to FAFSA because their parents may not have legal status. And
yeah. So
that is
that's the
that's a
other piece
huge
of it.
problem.
There's the actual course, and then there's the FAFSA completion. And when I asked the lobbyist supporting this about that requirement, because I have a senior in high school right now, we just did FAFSA. It is a huge pain, and I can guarantee you there's no way my kid could have filled it out on her own if we hadn't, her parents weren't sitting down for literally hours at the dining room table filling out this form. She wouldn't be graduating if this were a graduation requirement.
No, and I mean, and I can attest to that. Like my oldest did FAFSA, and it took us hours and hours. We finally got it back, and they were given a loan of $500. And so when my youngest went through
yesterday, we're like, oh, you're so very generous with your $5,000.
Right.
But
and so when my youngest went through it, I was like, it's not worth the time and effort to go through it in order to get $500 in a loan. And we knew that we probably weren't even gonna get that much because we had both been promoted since then. So it was like, I have problems with this. Yeah.
And Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but that FAFSA application, if I remember right, requires that you reveal like personal information, like your social security numbers, how much money you make. Well, I mean, like
it's your parents' social security number as well. And that's the problem with the immigration status, is that if you are required to reveal that your parents may not have a social security number, then that can be a real issue. And that would mean that those kids wouldn't I mean, it's bad now because those kids may not apply for FAFSA and therefore may not get into college, but this would prevent them from graduating high school.
Yeah, and I am so against that, making parents have to reveal their social security numbers on an application that they don't want their kid maybe to submit. I mean, maybe their child is going to be going into the trades and is already enrolled into trade school and it's already being paid for by the trades. And so why would we do this to people? I mean, it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess I would say if people want some encouragement of the FAFSA, I would be comfortable with having it part of the curriculum as far as like explanation of the FAFSA, but not filling it out. Like, I don't know if that's more
And to kind of wrap it up on this one, I think we're opposed.
Yeah.
But I have different reasons to oppose it, but I would suggest putting it into the monitoring category, just so that PSD doesn't stick their head out on the list saying that we hate everything. And then if you could speak with or if you run into the legislators who are putting this out there, just explain to us our kind of heartburn on it for multiple reasons. Mine are on the curriculum side. Even without the FAFSA stuff on there, any kind of new requirement makes us do a lot of work that gets the whole community upset, because if you put something in, you have to take something out.
Right.
I just want to chime in real quick. This is a passion of mine, and the FAFSA stuff, I totally agree with what you guys are saying. It shouldn't be required because there's a lot of people that don't want to necessarily send their kids to school. But financial literacy is a massive need in the community, and it's a both sides of the aisle issue. Just a general understanding of leases, car loans, things that you're going to encounter as an adult. How to manage credit cards, all that sort of thing. So I love that PSD requires it. I think there's some merit to saying it needs to be a statewide thing. And we got an email from a financial literacy teacher just last week saying don't try to consolidate it with another class like economics. I think there's some merit to that argument, because economics is a totally different thing than financial literacy when we're talking about personal finances. So I'm not for saying we're opposed to it. I like what you're saying, Connor, that we're monitoring. I would want to see an amended version, because I think the FAFSA stuff is problematic for sure. But I just know from my personal experience and my kids, they're clueless on a lot of this stuff, and it's dangerous. It really, had we not been there, we would have had some real trouble. And I think a lot of people get themselves in trouble because they don't understand what they're getting into. Understanding insurance, mortgages, all that kind of stuff.
Now you had started off, Anne, right, talking about how financial literacy is already in the standards, in the Colorado State standards. So is it having a class that would change things, or is it the standards that are the problem? In other words, I don't want to say, let's make financial literacy a requirement, and Scott, to your point, like what you think is important still isn't taught, right? So I think, is it the standards that's the issue here?
Right.
That's what I'd want to understand.
So this first section of the bill that talks about, a satisfactory completion of a course on financial literacy as defined in the section in 11th or 12th grade that incorporates the standards on financial literacy developed by the state board pursuant to. So, and this is consistent with what they told me, which was, we're not going to make any changes to the standards in this bill. So yes, I think to go to your question, Carolyn, it would be the intent of this bill would be teaching whatever is in our standards. And if the standards are insufficient, that's a different conversation. And frankly, one that's probably more appropriately directed to the state board, because they're the ones who are responsible for updating the standards every 6 years. So, if they're falling short on what is in the standards for financial literacy, then they probably need to make those adjustments. And I don't know what it's a rotating thing where they go through a certain number of subjects every year. And I don't know where financial literacy is in that rotation, but every 6th year, they will review the standards on this topic and make any kind of updates and changes they deem appropriate based usually on what they hear from their staff, but there's also opportunity for public comment usually. But so yeah, that would be a whole separate conversation. With regard to the FAFSA piece, and I think this is where maybe we should land on the bill, is if you're comfortable monitoring it through the first committee, I would be pretty shocked given all of the concerns you raised are pretty consistently shared. It was certainly like what I saw the first time I read it, which was, first of all, FAFSA is a huge pain for anyone. Add in a language barrier, add in questionable legal status in the country, add in just parents who just aren't as involved. You know, I mean, you can't keep a kid from graduating just because their parent won't sit down and do something for 2 hours. And I know of at least 2 districts that are making a really concerted effort to increase their FAFSA completion. And it takes a lot of extra nighttime hours of parent meetings and serving them food so they'll show up and all of this kind of parent outreach. It's a battle. And to place that kind of a requirement as, you know, graduation is a really high bar. So I'd be pretty shocked, setting aside the idea that, like, I don't think I've ever in my life seen a bill that implements in state law a new graduation requirement for everyone, that CASB just sits on their hands and watches. CASB hates graduation requirements with a passion. It is squarely state constitutionally in the, you know, the lane of local boards to do that and local control. So I don't think that this will make it through the first committee without some pretty dramatic changes. Definitely to the, I would be shocked if the FAFSA requirement stays in its current form. And frankly, even to the course requirement, that seems like a pretty tall order. So we could keep an eye on this one through the first committee and just see what changes are made, because I feel fairly confident that if it lives at all, it will see some pretty dramatic changes. I mean, I just think it's going to have to. And if it doesn't, if it starts moving along and doesn't get any amendments, you know, we can revisit and decide how we want to try to weigh in and what we might want to say. But I think for the first committee hearing, which I don't think has even been scheduled yet, I think we have some time to have some conversations. I think CASB meets Case and CASB both, I think, have their legislative meetings on Friday afternoons. So, you know, hopefully by next week, I'll have a better indication of where some of the groups and just individual districts are on this. But my guess is you're not alone in all of the concerns you're voicing. So I'm hearing that we'll leave that as a monitor for now and then kind of see how it goes through the first committee, and I can update you on changes.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next one. Okay, so this one I believe is helpful, but I would sort of put this one also into the category of if there's someone who knows about this kind of thing and can put some eyes on it with some expertise and tell me if it's actually good. Conceptually, this gets to something that I think districts have had some concerns with for a while, which is just the abundance of data reporting. The idea would be that there is an audit by CDE that just kind of goes through what districts are required to report, you know, what's being done with it and how often and how it's done and all the things, and then comes back on December 1st of 26 with some recommendations for how to just kind of maybe make it a little easier for the data collection and reporting on districts. So, you know, by my read, it seems like it should be a helpful bill. Not that this bill in and of itself would really do anything directly to help you. It would be what comes out of these recommendations, but obviously it's kind of a necessary first step. So I think it's new enough. We have one district monitoring, but nobody else has really weighed in yet. It was just introduced, 3 days ago. I would expect we will see more support, but I mean, again, if there's somebody who knows a little more about data reporting and things like that, could just kind of do a double check for me, that would be helpful.
Well, Kristen, I think when we were at CASB one time, we were talking about data collection and what an undue burden it is on smaller districts. They just don't have the resources to do some of the really in-depth reporting. And I think it really is an onus on them, right? On the smaller districts, where maybe somebody as big as our district have somebody they could devote to that. And a lot of districts don't have a person that can devote to that. And some of the requirements are pretty onerous.
Mm-hmm.
And we are lucky. We have experts in that.
Right.
If you look at our DE monitoring report, it's fabulous. But you're right, there are very small districts that don't have this ability. So this one CASB is probably going to weigh in too. I would assume.
Yeah, I would imagine. And this is not a new topic. I mean, it's interesting that they haven't done more to address this issue, because honestly, I mean, it's been almost 20 years since I started at CDE, and I learned what EDAC is. And that, I mean, EDAC has been talking about data collection and what districts have to do and all of this kind of stuff for almost 20 years, as long as I've been doing this. And I don't feel like I've ever seen a bill that meaningfully really consolidates and, just addresses the need for like evaluating all of the data that's collected and whether it's even necessary and how you can decrease the burden on districts. Because I mean, I definitely agree. Small districts seem to always take the brunt of these things, whether it's reporting requirements or creating grants that they don't have a grant writer to apply for, and just all of these different things. But also it's a burden at some level for almost every district. So if you can get back to me, this is another one that has not been scheduled yet. So I think we have some time to get some more information. I'll leave it as a monitor for now, with maybe an expectation that we may want to support it potentially. So 1215, I actually would like to ask Dave Montoya about this and maybe poke around a little bit. I read it, at least in the summary, as being helpful, almost a no-brainer for K-12 at least. But there aren't any K-12 districts lined up yet. Maybe it's just because this is a fairly recent bill and they just haven't considered it yet. But under the current law, we get $3 million out of the first tranche from lottery proceeds, and then 50% of that total that's left over after. So it's 3 million and 3 million, and then 50% of the remaining and this is just specifically Capital Construction Assistance Fund. So BEST. And this would change it to add an extra $1 million. So you'd have 4 million in the first scoop, and then you would still retain the same 50% for later. I mean, of the remaining dollars. So unless I'm misunderstanding what it does, it seems like it's an extra $1 million into the Capital Construction Assistance Fund, which seems like something
that's on top of, like, I think the 40 or so million that is there right now. Is that right? I mean,
yeah. So this is the ongoing. There's a couple of ongoing revenue sources for BEST, and this would be one of them. This is actually probably a lesser one. There's some marijuana tax cash fund. There's some. The biggest one I think is the state land trust land revenue that's generated off those lands. So I don't know that this is a huge amount in the grand scheme of, like an extra $1 million in that pot is probably not huge, but it's better than a poke in the eye. And in this climate, it's better than a cut, which is what we're facing in just about everything else.
Well, especially since I think the voters, when they voted aye on that or yes on it, I think that thought was that all that money was going to go to schools, right? And then it was kind of like, oh, no, not so much. This is how much is going to go to schools, and all the rest goes into the general fund, right?
Somebody was talking about how the marijuana tax cash fund has just become the thing that everybody points to as like, oh, that'll fix our problem. And you're kind of like, there's only so much of that to go around. And even that is not what they originally anticipated. So,
right.
So at any rate, that one is a bit of an FYI, but also a little extra money if you wanted to weigh in and support it, or, just kind of monitor. It's up to you. I don't know if you guys even get any BEST dollars. You probably don't, do you?
Yeah, we have gotten BEST dollars before. The last time we got BEST dollars is when Kathy Hansen applied for a BEST grant for venting for one of the welding labs because we didn't have a proper ventilation unit inside of the welding lab, and so we got money for that. That was pretty.
They're pretty minimal though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $40 million, and that's statewide $40 million. And think about it from that won't even build a grade school, right? It's like
Yeah. It's a lot of HVAC updates and new roofs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think I obviously support more money going to public ed. The one wondering I have is if they put like an extra $1 million here, if it somehow gets spun as a justification for cutting somewhere else. We'll give you $1 million here, but we'll cut 10 million over.
I think the good news of this being specifically in the Capital Construction Assistance Fund and not in, say, the State Ed Fund is that it's way less fungible in the sort of bigger picture of education funding. I think the General Assembly recognizes not all that many districts get BEST. The ones that do don't get a whole lot of money. It's a very small little slice. And I think generally speaking, they don't really think of capital construction money as education funding. Okay. I think they think of that as education funding, generally speaking, in their mind is operations or, so yeah, I don't think that's probably an issue for this. There are probably other areas where they may make that justification, but probably not on this bill. Okay. 1218, I'm not even sure I fully understand. Maybe someone with a little more understanding of these higher ed and concurrent enrollment programs can explain it to me, but it adds pathway, direct admission pathway programs into science, technology, engineering, and math degree or credential program as part of the concurrent enrollment programs that, that fall under that category is what qualifies as a concurrent enrollment program. So I sort of read that and went, well, okay. I put it on here as basically an FYI, but maybe if someone understands it more than I do, there might be a reason to take an interest. I'm not sure what this part here is exactly, or how common they are, how helpful they are, rigorous, any of that stuff.
Does it just make it easier for a community college and or the relationship between community colleges and high schools to create a trajectory?
It seems like it just expands. So of the programs, of the courses that would qualify as part of a concurrent enrollment program, it would include these programs, these courses, which to me seem like maybe CTE kind of courses, maybe. I'm not. Direct admission pathway program into science, technology, engineering, and math degree or credential. I don't know. I just don't know what those programs are. So I can go back and ask Rep. Valdez what exactly these programs are. I don't think anyone has, there's nobody that's weighed in on it. So, and there's no fiscal note available yet. Yeah, I put it on here because I would put anything mentioning concurrent enrollment on your tracker, but I'm not sure that I can advise you one way or the other about what to do with the bill. So let me see if I can just get a little more information.
Yeah, I think there's already pathways from higher ed into our four-year institution. So I'm wondering if it's just saying that can also be part of concurrent enrollment.
Okay, yeah.
Which would be great.
Okay, so I will see what I can find out about that. Okay, so 1230 is kind of an FYI bill. This is where my cynic side comes out, my cynical side. So I'm reading this, and I'm recalling a couple years ago, there was a bill, and I don't even remember now if it passed. I don't think it did, but it had to do with kind of, this upping the enforcement of traffic violations around school buses and people not stopping when they needed to for school buses. And as I recall, one of the concerns from districts was this kind of, are we now required to coordinate with local law enforcement or our municipality? We have to hand over the data collected by, I think the last one had like cameras or something. I'm not sure what this automated vehicle identification system is exactly, but anyway, is there an extra requirement on districts to do this kind of coordination and help with essentially traffic law enforcement? Because that is certainly not your area. You don't really need to have one more thing to do.
So are they asking for access to our cameras on the buses for traffic enforcement, or are they requiring it? I guess because I do want people to stop for the buses, and I do want people who are violating that to be ticketed. I don't like, when I'm on Highway 1 and I see somebody pass a bus when the kids are getting ready to cross the road. It's scary. I mean, we had a cop turn around on the highway to get one guy that had run the stop arm, and the guy almost got hit by another guy who had ran the stop arm. I mean, I guess, okay, privacy issues, cost issues, I guess I just need to know the specifics of how they want to implement this.
So the way I read it, it allows for this sort of coordination between a state, county, and city municipality to and a school district, so that a school district can utilize these AVIS systems, this automated vehicle identification system on your school buses, which then would collect information that the local, state, county, and city could use to then enforce the violation. I don't know that it speaks to. It doesn't require districts to do anything, from what I can read. It seems like it is a permissive thing between the local government and the municipality, county, and the school district. So here's where my cynical side came out. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I don't know, how we feel about this and who else supports it. And then I come down and I'm like, oh, wow, all of this support from Bus Patrol. Well, who's Bus Patrol? Oh, I believe it's probably the system that is the automated vehicle identification system company that sells these devices that are greasing the wheels to get a whole lot more money from school districts that are going to buy this system, or municipalities. And I don't actually recall who is on the hook to make the purchase, this AVIS system. But anyway, once I noticed who was like actively supporting, I was kind of like, oh, this seems like one of those where there's a private entity that wants an inroad for procurement with a governmental entity, and they're going to put something in a state law that will sort of help them with that procurement. So anyway, that's my cynical take on this bill. That being said, I don't know that it's a bad bill. Maybe it could be helpful. It does mandate oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'll be quick. I just will chime in. I think that anything we can do to help with enforcement, where we can, eliminate questions of he said, she said kind of stuff, where if we have the technology ourselves, so I wouldn't see why PSD wouldn't be willing to share that, especially if, God forbid, something happened with one of our students. We would absolutely want to share that. And so I would say at least monitor, but for sure I'm in favor of it. And there's no requirement, so that business that might be interested in selling it, if the budget's not there for a school district to do it, then they're not going to do it. So I don't think it's a selling point. I get that, but it's not a requirement. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess I want to know who has to pay, like who's paying for the device. I mean, because if we're paying for it, but the city gets the ticketing fee, that doesn't feel great. First, but second, like Scott, we have been upgrading our monitoring devices on our buses. I don't know that our devices would be this though.
Mhm.
I don't,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it would fulfill this.
Oh, I was thinking it was just like if we have camera footage, because I know we have out-facing cameras, so that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but I'm like, I just would want to know before, because yeah, I don't know where they're outwardly facing, if it's like what the criteria are.
All right, so
Right.
I think there's differing opinions on this. So this one is going to have a lot of markups going forward. So because any district that doesn't have cameras, if they can't get those paid for, they're going to obviously be in opposition to this. And as we know, cameras are not cheap. So why don't we put ourselves in the monitoring section there and see how it kind of plays out with the other districts that kind of have more to lose on this one.
I would say on its face, I'm kind of in favor of it, though.
Yeah,
On
I mean,
its face.
yeah, I like the idea. I like like Carolyn, I agree wholeheartedly what you said about if we can if our students can be more protected by having this in people's minds of like, you could get ticketed if this happens. Like, I'm in
Even
favor
if
of
there's
it.
not a cop around, you can get a ticket. And
Yeah.
I think that's, the problem now is people just like, oh, I'm going to beat the arm and I'm going to pass it, and so, yeah, that's the only reason I would say I'm a support, anything to improve compliance for safety.
Yeah. I just don't, I know we don't have the money to add yet another round of stuff to our cameras that does something for somebody else without at least getting it.
What if the city or the county were the ones who were installing the cameras or providing the cameras, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the way I kind of look at this bill, it kind of says that we don't have to provide them, right? I mean, like maybe the city would provide them. They have them right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just want to know before I commit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not super clear in the bill, but on page 4, starting on line 9, it does reference like the state, county, city, or city and county or municipality that has installed an automated vehicle system on a school bus. So it does kind of make it sound like it's the other local governmental entity that would be doing this installation, and it's sort of like you're just permitting them to be done on your buses. Is kind of the way I read it. It's not super clear because there's another place where it says if approved by the school board. Let's see. Well, it does say the city may utilize the automated vehicle system. So it does kind of seem like it is this other governmental entity that would be actually funding the product, the system. I'm curious though, kind of just taking this in a little bit different direction. Has your board has Poudre attempted in any way to do any kind of coordination with your local city or county for enforcement, just based on whatever cameras or equipment you currently have on buses? I mean, has there been any conversations about trying to like better enforce those violations?
I don't think so. There's actually a program that, if I understand right, where like different entities in Fort Collins team up with like it's like a county department where you can give them access to your cameras in the case of an emergency. So like, let's say that there was like a school shooting, and they would have like kind of preemptive like access to cameras. In other words, they wouldn't have to waste any time being able to look in and see where the shooter was. So there is a program where you can sign up for that. I think the board would need to get more information on it though, but there is a program.
Okay. Well, because I'm just kind of curious what is in current law that would preclude you from doing something kind of similar to this right now, as far as
student privacy. It's student privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I just was, if you've got cameras on the outside of your bus and you wanted to work with law enforcement to try to, provide information to them on violations or something, this may be necessary, but it may also not be necessary. And what it does seem like is it's pretty specific to this AVIS system, and not kind of whatever other devices or camera or equipment you might want to use or already have. But again, it does not look like it is on you guys to actually make the purchase of the system. So anyway, so I am hearing a monitor or support monitor. Okay.
I think monitor.
Okay.
I think we're generally like interested in supporting it, but
Okay. Well, it hasn't been calendared yet, so I can, check in with some other groups and districts and see, and I can, let me see who the lobbyists are. Yeah, I could talk to, Doug or Logan or somebody and see what the proponents are saying about it, just to kind of get their take. Maybe can revisit this next week. Okay, 1242 is another one that I really get out over my skis quickly if I start trying to talk about open meetings and Cora and the CCJRA, forget about it. I don't even know anything about the Criminal Justice Records Act, but this is a pretty extensive bill, which seems a little bit duplicative of Senator Kipp's bill, but goes quite a bit further. It is actually from one of your local reps, Garcia Sander. And the thing that I find kind of amusing is, Byron Pelton is not a freshman. Rep Garcia Sander may not realize what she has stepped into by trying to bring this bill without, at least to my knowledge, without much of any stakeholdering. Because I know from, witnessing Rep Kipp over the year, well, Rep Kipp, now Senator Kipp, over the years, she has had, oh my gosh, more stakeholder calls and Zooms and emails than I could even count. And I'm not aware of any such conversations around this bill. I was actually pretty surprised to see it. So, the one thing that jumped out to me that is duplicative would be this 3 to 5 day change for Cora responses, which is exactly what Senator Kipp has, I believe, in Senate Bill 77 now. So, I think this is one that we could take the same approach that we have for the other Cora bill and just say, we're just going to monitor this. I honestly, with some of these other components, I am not sure if they are helpful or not, if they are viable, as a bill. I think my guess is people are really going to come out of the woodwork on this, and Rep. Garcia Sander is going to start hearing from the Press Association and the Freedom of Information Coalition and, the ACLU and all of the various groups that weighed in on Senator Kipp's bill. Will probably also have feelings about this as well as the other, local governmental entities, records custodians, as well as what is not in Senator Kipp's bill, which is all the criminal justice folks. So I imagine there will be a lot of discussion about this one. I think it probably will not move very quickly because of that. And it has right now a committee hearing schedule of March 6th. So if there's anybody that would like to, or if any of you would like to just take a closer look at it and, let me know if you've got thoughts, if you want to weigh in or not, or, share any feedback with Rep. Garcia Sander. When I saw this one, I just kind of thought, oh boy, here's another one. So anyway.
That seems like a monitor. And also, am I reading that right, that it's going to the Veterans Affairs?
Yeah, although that's, sometimes State Affairs is considered the kill committee, and a lot of times it is an appropriate placement because this is something that deals with a governmental entity. So for laws that are around things like open records and public record custodians, State Affairs is probably an appropriate placement, not for purposes of just killing it. So I wouldn't read too much into that, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would want to read this one more closely.
Yeah, it's it's a lot. Let me see how many actual pages the bill is. It's 17. So, it's, but it touches a lot of areas, I would say, more than Senator Kipp's. And I will also say, again, after many, many, many stakeholder calls, Senator Kipp scaled hers back a lot, and from where she started. And this one seems, well, it's not even really close to where she started, because she was always just kind of purely in the records portion, but this touches open meetings. I think somewhere up here was something about open meetings, and like I said, CCJRA. So it's much broader than hers ever was. So yeah, if you've got any thoughts that you would like to share, or feedback that you'd like me to send to the sponsors, I'm happy to do that. I imagine this will be one that we'll just kind of, we can get your popcorn and sit on the sidelines, is what I would say. So 1245, I would love to have somebody who can give me a little more expertise on this one as well, because it seems like it could be potentially problematic for districts. It places some requirements on people doing the work of HVAC repairs and things, and also some requirements for districts when you're getting the work done. At the same time, it seems like it might be freeing up, so it has a cash transfer from this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act into just a kind of a more general state-owned real property fund. So yeah, I'm not sure how to read this, if it's helpful or burdensome or neither. Some of the requirements, because it talks about how if you're, you're using federal dollars, and you've got to, use a particular kind of person who meets certain requirements. I know that a lot of federal grants already require reporting, and you can only use certain contractors and things like that. So it may be that this isn't particularly burdensome if these are things that are already required because it's federal money. And this is just the state kind of, I don't know, reinforcing that. But anyway, I could use a little more guidance on the substance of this one.
I think that it puts a lot more requirements on the contractors, and therefore on the schools, and is probably going to increase the cost of installing HVAC systems, right? Because it looks like there's a lot more reporting required there and testing. I guess the question would be is what were they trying to solve here? What kind of inspections are currently being done, and are they adequate or not? I mean, if we're trying to solve a problem, like maybe we had some CO2 problems in a school and that's because we didn't do the proper testing, well, then maybe it's appropriate, because nobody wants that, right? But if we're trying to fix a problem that maybe doesn't exist, I mean, like it looks onerous just from the summary here.
Yeah, it does. And I guess where I have a hard time assessing just how onerous it is I'm not familiar with how much reporting and how the current requirements for this kind of work, particularly if you're talking about the federal funding source.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
the other thing, I'll send it on to Dave and operations and see if they can take a look at it. But I got to tell you, the last sentence gets me too. For each award of federal dollars obtained with the unit's grant writing support, the unit is authorized to retain 2.5%. That's,
Yeah, which honestly, I mean, I can remember having this battle with grants, because when I was at CDE, it was at the peak of the recession, and in 08, 09, 2010. That was the thing legislators did. There was no money to actually fund programs, so they made everything a grant. And so as the department administering the grant, we always felt like we needed administration, be able to retain a certain amount for administration. And, there were some that were 1% and there were some that were 10%. And I remember having conversations about what is like the reasonable amount for, and I feel like they landed on 3 as kind of our standard ask, when in the absence of anything automatically included, it was like 3% for administration. But I mean, again, if I know from during the pandemic, and there were ARPA funds, and there was federal money coming in for districts to do HVAC and air quality improvement things already. And so I was trying to kind of read this and jog my memory and connect the dots of like, is this somehow, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act? Is that a carryover from some of that money or program, or is this totally different? What requirements were we already doing to meet those other federal dollar? I feel like federal dollars always have strings, and you've always got to, fill out reports and meet thresholds for the work and all that kind of stuff, prove you're spending it correctly. So I'm assuming that if we were already spending federal dollars on work like this, we were doing some kind of reporting, and there was already probably some kind of requirement for who could do the work. The question is, how different is this? And what was the, if they were already doing grants like this, do they already have this fund in place, and this, this program is already funded with admin? So do they really need another 2.5%? So anyway, I feel like this is one of those where there are kind of a lot of different pieces, and I'm just not quite sure how to put them all together to evaluate this one. But yes, on its face, it does seem like there's a lot of burdens. And frankly, I mean, I don't know if you have this problem in Fort Collins, but I hear from other places, like, it can be really challenging to find people to do the work. And if you're placing higher requirements on who can do the work, you're just narrowing that pool even more. So these people that want to be really helpful and make sure you've got great HVAC systems may actually be hurting you, because they're keeping you from finding anybody to do the work. So
yeah.
So let me know what you hear about that one. So 1248 is the other seclusion bill. This one, from my understanding, is coming from Disability Law Colorado, and they are working, or at least have had conversations with districts. Do not anticipate, underscore anticipate, too much opposition from districts on this one. I don't think anyone has registered a position yet. But this, and this is where I would warn you to kind of, this is maybe step 1 of a multi-step process. What they're currently doing in this bill is kind of consolidating or pulling out things from the Restraint Seclusion Act that are specific to schools and putting it all in Title 22. So they're all kind of in the same place with all the rest of the school laws, so that what you can do is easy to find, but not actually changing a lot of substantive what's currently in law. However, I have also been told that once they get it all into the school laws, and it is, clearly delineated and kind of, restructured, then they may start picking things out and eliminating your ability to, all these like exclusions and things like that, or the allowances for districts to do certain things. So I think future bills may come from this that we might want to be a little more cautious about. This one in particular, I'm not sure is, it as a standalone bill, I'm not sure that this warrants much. So it has a lot of language, but I believe there is some strike through. Do they have the strike throughs? No. Yeah, they're pulling out some of it, but I can go back and see if I can get any sort of a write-up from disability law, if that's helpful. But that was how it was explained to me by their lobbyist. So at any rate, the other thing that the disability law lobbyist said was that he feels like this is of the two restraint and seclusion bills, this one seems like probably politically more viable as a bill than the other one that is from Rep. English. That being said, like I said, this one hasn't had anybody weigh in. The other one only has people monitoring, of the districts that have weighed in, so to speak. They're only monitoring. So this hasn't been scheduled at all. And I can't actually remember if 1178 was calendared yet or not, but no, it's not scheduled. So neither of them have been calendared. My guess is they're going to sit for a little while people kind of have conversations and figure out how the two will work together or not. There will be negotiations. If it's something that you want to really engage in as a topic, I would suggest maybe more so the 1248 one. You've got your own senator as a sponsor. Katie Stewart is a teacher and I think, wants to try to be helpful for districts generally. So I think, yeah, if there's any general feedback on this topic from Poudre, I would say we could try to make our statement through 1248. Otherwise, we could probably just monitor both of them and kind of see how they get negotiated.
Who could we have look at this? Is that Jody Omo?
Is that a SPED person?
Yeah, it's our director.
I would say SPED director probably is the right person.
I think we need to talk to the people who this will affect in all practicality. So at the school level, I'd like to know from principals, what kind of onus does this put on you and what are your experiences and how will this help you and how might this hurt you? I'd just like to know at the school level what they think too, right? So This is where it's going to be enforced.
Yeah.
I would say if you are sharing these with anybody, I would maybe, if you can, send both of them. So 1178 and 1248, just so folks kind of see the comparison. The more, I guess, dramatic one to really say hey, how does this affect you or what impact would this have would probably be the 1178 one. Mm-hmm. But I also think 1248 is kind of an important part of the conversation too. So yeah, I think gathering input would be helpful. All right, I think we have just this last one left. I don't think I have any new Senate bills this week. So the last one on the House side is House Bill 1250. Does create a requirement for districts. So it has the Office of Gun Violence Prevention creating materials, and they have their own website. They will assist school districts in providing materials. The requirement on districts is that you've got to share them with parents and guardians and students. And let's see, annually at the beginning of each school year and also on your website. So it's not particularly prescriptive. Let me pull up the actual bill on what materials are. Okay, so just materials created in the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Yeah, so I don't know,
how on our website on our website, we already have gun safety, the Juvenile Gun Safety Coalition, and It Only
Okay.
Takes a Moment campaign. So we already have those on our website.
Okay.
I don't know if that would, it sounds like they're asking for, pamphlets to go home with or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would have to, in addition to what you have on your website, probably you'd have to do two things. You would most likely have to update what you have currently on your website, would have to change to whatever is either inclusive of or in lieu of the, including the material that is put out by the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So I think the bill is pretty specific that it's that material that you have to have on your website from their office, which may not, be a huge burden in and of itself. If you've already got a place on your website, you could probably just add more. But then you also have to somehow distribute it to parents and students at the beginning of every school year. So I don't know what that looks like. I think the biggest question that I would have is, and it's nowhere in here, any kind of indication about how much material are we talking about?
Right.
Is this a single page? Is it a booklet? Is it multiple web pages? So I don't know if maybe that's something I could just ask the sponsors about, to kind of say, could you be a little more specific about the quantity of material we're talking about?
Yeah.
Also, they're talking about the federal one, right? The
federal office or
Yeah.
I think this is the state one because it's in the State Department of Public Health and Environment. So CDPH, Colorado CDPHE has an Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And so that state office, I think, is the one that they are saying would have to.
Okay.
Probably.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt, but I have to hop off the call to get on another work thing. So thank you for the update, and I will talk to you all next week.
Thanks, Connor.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I think for this one, I mean, our students and families already get their student handbook. So if this is something that they can do that electronically. So if we can distribute electronically, I would be fine. But if we're like saying we have to print and create something that they give us and then distribute it, that's supplies and resources we don't have to spare. So like, while I appreciate the goal, because I get if I'm reading between the lines, I feel like this Office of Gun Violence Prevention doesn't necessarily have the spread of information the way a school district would, right? So I appreciate the want to get out the information and make sure everyone is aware of like how to protect kids and families. And that sounds amazing. So I think I just want to ask the question of like, what does distributing mean and who's funding that distribution?
Right. So let me just check in with the sponsors on some of these questions and see if I can get a little more information on how they would envision this working. I feel like as it's drafted, it just feels pretty vague. A lot of times I feel like I'm arguing in the other direction where it's like, why do we have to have this much specificity and spell everything out? But then the reverse is it just leaves people guessing and you don't know what you're really signing on to. So getting some of that clarification. And a lot of this stuff, I would think, if they really are trying to kind of not make it onerous on districts, they wouldn't have a problem with, I think this was Eliza Hamrick again, who is just, not typically an anti-school district kind of person. Wouldn't think she would have a problem with just clarifying this, annual distribution to students and parents could be, electronically or in print or, or how, by whatever means the district currently uses to distribute information. There's plenty of language like that we could use that would clarify these points.
The summary does say or electronic format. I missed that before.
Okay, I didn't see that either. And that's on the distribution to parent part.
Provide
Or is it on-
materials in written or electronic form. So it's like after the
Okay.
first paragraph.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, okay. So, okay, well, so that part may be okay, but I still think it would be helpful to know the quantity of materials they're envisioning, because I feel like on a topic like gun safety, it could be extensive if they decided they needed to.
Well, and what, I mean, do we have to have confirmation that somebody read it, or is it just simply we have to claim that we gave it to them? But
Yeah.
if it's just distributing, I get where they're coming from, because we have, you know, a list of people that maybe they don't have access to.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll ask some questions, but we'll just, for position purposes, leave it just as like a monitor, no position right now. Okay, that's all I have. Just so you guys know, I have now had a couple of meetings with your local legislators. I met with Rep. Basenecker a week ago Monday, and then I also met with Rep. Zokai on this past Tuesday or Wednesday. And my conversations with them have basically been around two funding topics. Number one, trying to make sure that we when and if someday we will have money again, when we are in a better financial position, that we sort of keep our eye on the ball of trying to raise the floor. Poudre has been a floor funded district and or at the bottom of the J curve for like as long as I've been in this place. So that's the big ticket item that probably cannot happen this year, but we just kind of want to make sure we're tracking that one. The one that I'm hoping to maybe get some movement on this year, if I can, is much smaller dollar amount. So, you know, you wouldn't see a huge bump, but trying to get, and I've learned a lot this week, actually. Originally, and when I talked to you last week, I was thinking of it more in terms of maybe a new factor that was specific for remote schools, where we currently have a size factor and rural remote factor for districts, but giving larger districts that are operating small individual buildings an equal bump of some variety. In the course of those conversations, so I had that conversation with Rep. Basenecker, and he, of course, was just like, whatever Poudre needs, let me know. I'm happy to help. I always want to help them. And then after I met with him, I had some more conversations with some Ledge Council folks, and I was reminded of something I'd forgotten about. There's actually a categorical that already exists, and it's a small attendance center. And so I talked to Dave, and you all do get some money for a small attendance center. And I think we talked about this last week, Jessica. I think you actually looked this up while we were talking. So I have gone on in further conversations. I talked with Rep. Zokai about this, and I also talked with some of the other like school finance people, you know, advocates in the Capitol and the K-12 lobby. And I just said, look, you know, I've got to get something for Poudre. You guys did not benefit from this new formula. There's got to be something we can do. So I think what we're going to try to do is really make a play for that small attendance center money. And we will do, what I'm pushing for is a couple of things. This is what I talked to Rep. Zokai about. If we just, so the categoricals is a singular pot of money that the JBC essentially gets to divvy up. The entire pot has to grow every year by inflation. But within that pot, usually what sucks up most of the dollars are special ed and GT and transportation and those bigger groups. It's like 1.6 million statewide. And honestly, I think there's only 2 districts that really, you know, get this money, or at least 2 districts that don't also qualify for a small size factor. And it's you guys in Mesa 51, Grand Junction. So looking at, can we just bump up that current line item? So going from 1.6 million to 3 million, for example, that like doubles the amount in that pot. But in the grand scheme of, you know, a $5 billion school finance budget, 1.2, 1.6 million is not a huge increase, especially when you're not actually, you know, that's, you could suck up, you know, a few 100,000 from all the other categoricals to come up with that. So that would be one thing that I would like to do, is just increase the pot of money. Now, that still doesn't change the fact that if we were right last week, Jess, that probably only helps us with one building. So I would also like to see if we could update the thresholds for what qualifies as a small attendance center. So if we were to bump up, excuse me, the number of students in an attendance center from 200 to 250 or whatever. And this is where, I want to work with you guys to make sure we set them appropriately, but trying to get all of your remote schools to qualify. And when I say all, is it 3? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
just
it depends. If it means like they're further apart, like I think like CLP, what did you say? They were like 15 miles apart. It was with the threshold or 20?
I think it's 20. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's the other, it's the number of students and the distance. And I think both of those levers I can work on moving.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I would want to just make sure, like, if you guys tell me these are the schools that we would like to have qualifying, and this is how far they are, and this is how many kids they have, that would help inform me. I can't make any promises, but those are the conversations I've been having to try to just move that forward, because it feels more doable in this fiscal climate than raising the floor for 9 districts.
Okay. And can I ask you, is it okay if I change topics for just a moment?
Mm-hmm.
2 things I have. One, Ascent. Is that going to be wiped out, the Ascent program? That's what we heard.
Oh, I had not heard that. I heard that they were changing the cap. I feel like they revisit that conversation every year with, like, where are we going to set the cap on how many Ascent kids we're funding? But, and then at some point there was also a discussion about, well, we still need to consolidate. I thought we had already consolidated all of our PSEO it used to be there were like 15 different post-secondary option group programs, and they kind of put them all under the umbrella of Ascent, but apparently there are still some outliers maybe. So I've heard kind of reining that in a little bit, but I had not heard of totally eliminating.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the email. Because that wasn't just me, right? That y'all got that.
That was something I was going to ask too. I'm glad you brought it up, Chris. And that came out on Tuesday night of our meeting, and then just now an email went out to students, just giving them a heads up. Let me see if I can read that.
I know. I'm trying to find it too, and I'm just like.
Do you remember where it came? Who you got it from?
Lauren.
Yeah. Our district staff.
Yeah, it was our district staff. And it was just
saying here's the email. I'm sorry. You want me to read it, Chris, or you got it?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. No, you can go ahead and read it. Yep.
So this is the one that just went out to students and family. We are informed this week that there may be changes to the Ascent program due to constraints and significant shortfalls. More specifically, it was communicated that funding for Ascent may be reduced or eliminated beginning in the fall of 2025. Expect to receive final confirmation in April. Given this uncertainty and the state's budget shortfall, we encourage all Ascent applicants to explore alternative financial aid and scholarship opportunities. The counselors and college career staff at each high school are available. And then it just says we're currently holding slots, but we're not able to give an official award until April. That's pretty much it. So it's similar to what we were told by Lauren. And this one is, like, to me, it's a pretty popular program, and really gives kids that maybe wouldn't have a chance. They remove that barrier to entry into college education and give them a chance at least for a year. I would think. I was talking to Brian about this the other day, and he said that he thinks it might be a negotiating tactic, where there's this shiny thing that nobody wants to go away, so it's going to force people to give up on something else. But I don't know. I'd love to know if this is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that it's messing with the students, because if you've decided to be an Ascent student, it's February. It's too late to do anything else.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
If you're gonna do it, you can maybe do it for 26. I still don't like it. I don't want that to happen. But at least don't mess with the students who have already signed on to be an Ascent. Yeah.
Yeah. There are kids that
This,
didn't even apply to other colleges with the idea that they're going to
Exactly.
do Ascent,
Yes.
or didn't apply
Exactly.
for scholarships to those colleges because they're like, oh, I've got a year before I'm going there. So
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's too
yeah,
late.
Yep.
bad.
so here's my take on it. The way you just read that, like the words felt sort of carefully selected, and also feels, knowing how this world operates, a little bit like one of those telephone games where somebody heard some comment that was made at the JBC, and it was someone at CDE who heard it, and maybe someone else within CDE got it communicated to them, and they sent out some message to districts that said something, and then district staff interpreted that. And I don't think it is probably inaccurate so I think the way you read it was like decreased or eliminated or something like that.
Right. That's right.
So I think that I can envision a conversation, not that I have heard this, but I could envision something at the JBC of, well, we may have to, like, cut into this, or this is a program that might be, is kind of expensive and it may not be sustainable, and we may have to decrease it. Again, they set caps on how many participants they budget towards, and so maybe we lower the cap. They usually do that based on what I've seen in the past is they set a cap up here, and then their ultimate enrollment was below it, and so they would lower the cap to match where the reality was, so they didn't have to budget so much. But I think it has been growing over the years, so that may not be the case anymore. But it sounds to me like maybe like an overly cautious way to communicate that, or just kind of a, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to like throw anyone under the bus, but sort of like it's probably stated a little more harshly than maybe needed to be stated when you're talking about communicating to students who are then going to hear it and panic, because I'm not sure that we're at that stage yet. And the other thing too is, I mean, you guys can help me with how this actually works on the ground, but there's kind of a trajectory that you get into for Ascent, right? And so like, I think that the numbers we're talking about would be on the front end of like cutting back on who's coming into it at the beginning, not like cutting you off when you're just making this transition into higher ed after you've already been on that trajectory or something. So
Ascent's a one-year program though, so I mean, you're cutting them off before they started. You're not cutting them off midway.
Okay, so it is just a one. I was under the impression that they were like,
no, it's only a one-year program, correct?
I thought it was
That's
two. I thought like you had to be like, you have to have requirements, so you have to have taken at least 9 credits, I believe it is, before like in your senior year, so that you can be part of Ascent the following year.
Right.
I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking is not necessarily the funding, but sort of like you can project out how many spots are going to be available. If they say, we're going to lower the cap next year or 2 years from now, the kids that are coming in doing those requirements would know that before they start heading down that road. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is if you do it, but I guess what I'm saying is that those kids, if they're going to cut it off in the 25-26 year, those kids have already done the requirements and have enrolled in it already. So you're cutting them off. Yes, you're right about next year. But it is only a 1-year program, a 5th year.
I just texted Mark Carey and Ledge Council to see if he knows anything about, total elimination or what that, what cuts might look like. So I'll ask about that and see what I can find out.
I have a little bit more information for you. This is what Lauren said. She said that on Tuesday, career and tech education staff met at the state Colorado CTE meeting. During the meeting, CTE staff across the state were informed that the state is considering reducing or eliminating funding for the Ascent program effective fall of 2025. So it was kind of like an official heads up from Colorado's CTE staff to all the state or all the individual school CTEs. So
CTE staff being like from within CDE, or are they in DHE, or?
I'm not sure. I'll forward this to you so you have.
Okay.
If that's
Yeah,
all right.
that would be helpful actually, because I mean, again, I feel like this is the kind of thing where something is said at the Capitol and then it gets repeated in some iteration to 2 or 3 different people in different organizations, and I'd be a little surprised if they completely eliminate assent, just like cold turkey.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem, especially given how much effort has gone into building it up over the years, and they've put a lot of emphasis into, concurrent enrollment and P20 and all of that sort of vision that
A good point.
it doesn't seem like a realistic thing they would do. Now, potential cuts, yeah, possibly. Again, though, I feel like even that, I don't think they would just do that, in this upcoming budget year. Kids who've already qualified and are already on that track, that doesn't seem likely or appropriate, but that's not to say, they're trying to come up with $1 billion or more. So who knows what kind of crazy things they'll do, but I'll see what I can find out. And anything you can send me is helpful.
Okay,
Thanks, Scott.
thank you.
And Kristen.
Yeah, I
Appreciate it.
just forwarded that over to you, Ann, and it has a copy of the email that went out to the students as well. So
Great.
You got
Okay.
both communications there. So yeah, thanks for looking into that. And I think you have a good point about it being really counterproductive if they just pull the rug out of a program they've been building, and it would ruin a lot of goodwill.
I feel like they would sooner reintroduce the BS factor than to just totally eliminate assent. That's not.
I hate to point this out, Ann, but they already did. They just named it the polis factor. So,
Right.
I'm
Good
sorry.
point.
Yeah.
Well,
The other question I had was on SB 2563, the library resource decision standards.
Oh yeah, that one was in committee this week.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, my concern on that one, and I've actually reached out to Lisa Cutter, and it's again, we're not including the experts in that. We're not including the librarians and the media specialists in that, and it becomes a board decision. And for some of those board decisions, for some of the boards that you think about that, and you're like, okay, that means we won't have any book bans. And for some of the boards that are more inclined to do this means that you're giving them an opportunity to simply set up a policy that allows you to do it.
Yeah. So, and I assume, when did you talk to her after the committee, or did you just email her, or what was?
I talked to her after, I think it was after Monday.
Okay.
Which I think it went to committee Monday, right?
Yeah, all my days are blurring together. Yeah, I guess it was earlier this week. So CASB got their amendment on. I was kind of working with Matt Cook and keeping an eye on it too. Basically, it was a strike below of the original bill. And I have what's open right now is the strike below, which is essentially, my understanding at least, is that it's you have to have a policy, and it gives a lot more sort of flexibility to the local boards. But I don't know, Kristen, if that is actually going to get to your concern about who is involved in the decision making. Because when I was talking to Matt, it was more about we need less prescription in the bill. So I think if we wanted to have, did Cutter say anything? Did you guys talk about the CASB amendment or?
No.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I worry that you make a policy that says 2 school board members and 2 community members will meet to decide if the book needs to be taken off the shelves, and you take 2 community members who are anxious to get every book off the shelf and to board members who are anxious to, you followed exactly what's written in the law, but
Right.
you have, not been able to appropriately discuss why books are there. So either from any expert. So that's my concern. I did like the librarians and media specialists and teachers were not to be what was it, I forget what they called it, but the contract volunteer public not subject to termination, demotion, discipline, or retaliation for
Yeah.
for refusing to remove it.
Yeah.
But
And
just saying that you have to have a policy, and then it just, I worry that all we're doing is setting ourselves up to say we've done everything by the book to remove the books.
Right. And that's I think that's kind of we'll have to figure out how to strike the balance, basically.
Yeah.
So I am just kind of looking now because I'm trying to remember. I know that they kept in the retaliation piece here. So this is still in. Yep. What I am trying to remember is how prescriptive they remained on some of the policy, on how the policy is established or who's involved.
Yeah.
Because,
and there's a lot of stuff I liked about, you couldn't revisit it more than every 2 years. You couldn't, there was a lot of that good stuff in there.
And that I think is also still in. So the reconsider. So yeah, I think the 2 years is still in here. Yeah, shall not reconsider more than once every 2 years.
Yeah.
Let me talk to Matt about your concern, because poor Matt Cook has worked so hard on this topic for 2 years. And so I feel like he finally was just like, oh, thank God we've got this like taken care of. And I really don't want to go back in and be like, so Matt.
And I understand the intention of it. What I'm trying to prevent is the unintended consequences of it. And that's where I'm seeing this is because, having worked in a public library, we see this a lot where the board simply decides we don't want that, and they followed the policy, but they are tired of getting complaints, and so therefore they just take it off the shelves by following the policy that's written. But that policy didn't include talking with any experts.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think that was that particular aspect of the original bill, as far as the prescriptiveness of how the policy is established or what has to be considered and all of that stuff that was in the original bill, was what I think Matt was trying to get out to. I think the goal is to say each board can have their, local control. Each board can decide how they want to go about this and who they want to have involved in the decision and the policy. As long as they have a policy, that's all that matters. I can talk to him and see if maybe, I don't know if there's something we want to try to. Are you wanting to advocate for an amendment that would put something back in on that topic?
I would love to have a discussion with somebody about that, whether it's an amendment, whether it's, I just want people to understand the unintended consequences.
Yeah. Okay. You know what I might do, Kristen, if it's all right with you, I might broach this topic with Matt, but then I might actually have him reach out to you directly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or
Okay.
I can reach out to Matt directly if it's easier, but maybe prep him.
Yeah, I'll give him the heads up because I think, can you guys hear me okay? I think my computer's frozen. Poor guy. I know he has worked so hard on this bill, and I can just see his face if we're like, actually, we want it back. So I want to just.
And that, that one of the things that I had, argued against the bill last time was that it did the same thing. It was saying that and it included public libraries too, that all you need to do is write a policy. And
Right.
that policy could be if one person decides. So,
Right. Yep.
so, and this
True.
is, I mean,
So,
and this is strictly for public school librarians. So it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the public library. It's, but I've seen, the consequences. So.
right. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that it might be helpful if I can just connect you and Matt, and maybe
Okay.
we can figure out a way to thread the needle, because I appreciate all the work he has done on it, and I think by and large he made it much more palatable for a lot of districts.
Mhm.
But so I don't want to throw that off. But I mean, I
No.
also
Understood.
see what you're saying about the unintended consequences, and
Yep.
and I think the sponsors probably would agree with you on that.
So I just, yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Yep. All right. So
Thank you.
any other bills to discuss or concerns about any of the other?
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I
We
think so.
did. Yeah. Okay. Well, you guys know how to find me. Enjoy your 3-day weekend.
Thank you. You too.
I will go off and try to get some of this information we've discussed and let you know what I can find out.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. If it's okay with you, I will go ahead and stop the recording.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.